You are a Washington Commanders fan. Then what happened about a month ago, which was of course Super Bowl 57? And I wanted to ask you this question because I'm gonna be real with you because we haven't talked really since the last time I had you on the air, which was about before that Monday Night Football game where you said the Washington Commanders could very well knock off my Philadelphia Eagles, and you were absolutely correct on that. Um, Listen, I'm not gonna lie, and I'm not a blame the ref kind of guy. But I'm not mad at the fact that we lost the Super Bowl. I'm mad that I felt like we did not get a proper chance to drive down the field and see what happened. And I said, listen, they missed a holding call in the first quarter on James Bradbury that should have absolutely been called, and that was 100% holding. But they missed. And I thought, in the Super Bowl, you sort of let the receivers and DBs play, just like you sort of let the linemen play. And unfortunately, I don't like it that it feels like over the last 2 years, NFL big time games, whether it's the AFC, NFC championship game, or even you can go back to last year's Super Bowl with the Rams and the Bengals, where the Rams got a favorable call on a slight holding call that many people didn't think was a hold in that game. So I don't like the fact the refs are taking the game out of the hands of the players. And I don't want to sound like a crazed fan, Eagles fan whining about the refs. But from your perspective, I guess your thoughts on what happened in the Super Bowl.
I think there needs to be a consistency with how officials officiate the game or the big time games. I don't disagree with you there. There needs to be a consistency. You were talking about it earlier. The James Bradbury hold the first quarter. You call that. If you're going to call that, then you have to call them the rest of the game because at least it sets the tone for what players can and can't do. Now let's fast forward all the way to the call. And as a Commanders fan, I was pulling for the Chiefs. I'll be honest.
Yeah,
I can't see the Eagles win a
as you
Super
should.
Bowl. Yeah, it cannot be any more sad than what happened on that play for James Bradbury. I'll give a lot of credit to the Eagles though. They owned up to it. And I think from my perspective, when I saw the call, it was the call. You make the call. But if you're gonna make that call, you should have made the first one way in the first quarter to set the tone and just not have any discrepancy about what calls are going to be during the game. So I definitely believe that should have been called. And going forward, the NFL officials need to be more aware of what type of calls you're going to be making because if a game has to be decided upon a flag that wasn't called prior to when you made the call, there has to be consistency. So whether you want to let them play, whether you want to be strict, you got to let it know to the fans, to the players, hey, this is how we're going to call the game. So adjust around it. Getting back to the call though, great call, correct call. You're not going to get anything from me. I just think that if you're an Eagles fan and if you're a player of the Eagles, you had an opportunity before the Mahomes scramble to get the stop, and you didn't. So if you get the stop on Mahomes and he doesn't do that scramble, why are you in that position anyways? As a team, you have to be better. Your defense had to be more aware that, on a third and long, or it may have been a fourth and long, but I know it was a third or fourth and
Yeah.
long. You have to get that stop. If you do get that stop, Andy Reid's not going for it. He's punting that ball away because at that point you're pushing overtime. So if the Eagles just get the stop and that's pretty much all I have to say. You're not going to get that call at the end of the game. I think players just have to be better, and this is why I like the Eagles post game reaction. It sucks. I get it. I'm never going to understand from a player's perspective losing the Super Bowl, like losing a big game like that. I'm never going to be in that position. But for Jalen Hurts, James Bradbury, Nick Sirianni, for all those guys to go up there after the game and say, "Hey, we didn't get the job done. We weren't good enough. They outplayed us. They did X, Y, and Z better than us." It shows that there's maturity, and I like that a lot. And there was no immaturity with that team. The only thing that I'm really not liking is this whole Juju Smith Schuster, AJ Brown thing that's happening on social media. I think Juju Smith-Schuster, you have the right to celebrate and say you won, but at the same time, if I'm A.J. Brown, why buy into that? You should be putting your nose to the ground and grinding for next year. Don't let some fool on Twitter make fun of you and what happened. But I really do like the ownership that the Eagles took. And I think going forward as an Eagles fan, Brandon, you should expect that this team now knows what it feels like to lose at a Super Bowl like that. 5 years ago when they won, they were like, oh man, we won the Super Bowl. Now you know how it feels to get to the game and just be so close to what your dreams were. And no one thought the Eagles were going to be in that position. I thought the Eagles could win the division, but I didn't expect them to be one of the best teams in the NFL and go on and go to the Super Bowl. So I think for the Eagles and for yourself as a fan, you had a great year. It's Mahomes you're going up against. Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL. Let's get that straight right now. But for the Eagles moving forward, you now know what it feels like to lose. Put your nose to the ground, go from there. And I thought the game was amazing. It was great. Had everything you wanted to ask for as a fan. Rihanna was the halftime show, so I was excited with that too. But at the end of the day, if I'm the Eagles, I know free agency is looming in a week. Try and keep some of your pieces that you had on the team this year because I know, and we'll dive into this a little bit in a second, but you got CJ Garner Johnson, you have Javon Hargraves, you have James Bradbury, you have all those guys pending free agency from that defense. You've already lost 2 coordinators, you had to hire 2 coordinators. So there could be a lot of change going on for the Eagles after the Super Bowl run, but we'll have to save that for another time.
So you just gave my team some great compliments. And let me give the Washington football team a compliment. And the reason I say that is because, as you know, and we talked about this the last time you were on the show, I've been very critical of the organization for not, in my opinion, leaning offensively and trying to fix that side of the ball. It's felt very old school for the last couple of years. It's felt like, oh, we're just going to get a veteran quarterback. We're going to run the ball. We're going to play defense. And I feel like that's not the way you win a Super Bowl in 2023. So Ron Rivera finally got smart and he decides to go out and he decides to hire the one, the only Eric Bieniemy from the Kansas City Chiefs. I think it's a great hire for Washington. Obviously, Austin, I think my only question, I'm sure it's your only question as well. As you know, it's a quarterback-driven league. And so there are reports out there, and we can sort of mix this in with the Lamar Jackson situation, the Commanders. There's been reports they are interested. There's been reports they're not interested. And so whether or not they end up getting Lamar Jackson, and then by virtue of that becoming a legitimate threat in not only the NFC East, but the weaker conference in the NFC, I think Bieniemy will have success. I think Washington will be better. But depending on how well that success will be, I think will be based off who is under center for you guys in 2023.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump into the Eric Bieniemy hire, and then I'll kind of work my way through the timeline.
Yeah.
So on Twitter, I can be vocal about the Commanders. I mean, there's no surprise there. So I'm going back on my Twitter feed right now. I said on the 10th of February, about a month ago, I don't know about all of you, but I've been very eager to know who the team is going to hire as an offensive coordinator. The more I wait, the more I thought Eric Bieniemy was going to be the Commanders' OC. Then I keep going down, and I'm not going to get into all my exchanges, but then on the 15th, I tweeted, it seems like Eric Bieniemy to Washington is very real. I quote unquote ended that with, I want the Kansas City pie. Eric Bieniemy, in every facet of his game as an offensive coordinator, whether he helped Andy Reid game plan games for the offense, whether he did call some plays here and there and they're just not saying it in the media, hiring Eric Bieniemy was the best possible move the Washington Commanders could have made. And I'll even go back during the season, Washington had an insane run. They get to 7 wins. They're like 7-3 or 7-4. And then all of a sudden they just start losing games. And at this point, I'm thinking, Ron Rivera needs to go. Like this, enough's enough. You have to get an offense and you have these players that can put you over the top. And yet Scott Turner is inept. He runs the same plays over and over again. It does not work. Why the hell is he the offensive coordinator? Then he gets fired. Okay, great. You're trying to save yourself at this point. And then after the Super Bowl, what do? You go out and you get the number one offensive coordinator target that was out there. Now, I believe Eric Bieniemy should already be a head coach. That's another talk for another day. But the fact that he hasn't been a head coach yet, you go out and make a hire for him to now prove himself that he can be a head coach in this league is a win-win for both sides. And I get ownership is looming. And I understand that there is going to be a major change within the organization from who signs your paychecks week to week or month to month, however they run it. But getting Eric Bieniemy, who now has full control of this offense, the defense stepped up. They did what they needed to do last year. They had so much criticism from the year before heading into this year about how they were going to get back to where they were in 2020. They proved it last year that they can get back to where they were in 2020. They did a great and fantastic job. The offense just needs a quarterback. And the quarterback that's the name of the town right now is Lamar Jackson. And with the news coming out earlier today that it's a non-exclusive franchise tag, my honest opinion about this, Brandon, if you don't even inquire about it, I will be confused. Now, I'm also one to believe that I think how Sam Howell played at the end of last year in that Week 18 game, I'd like to see what he
Yeah,
does.
for
I
sure.
don't want to see the Commanders go out and get a guy like Aaron Rodgers for where you may only get him for maybe 1 or 2 years. Do you want a 1 or 2 year stability? No, I don't think so. I'm not questioning Aaron Rodgers is good. I know he's good, but you can't have that short term stability. You want someone where they are going to be the franchise for you moving forward and for years to come. So I think with Sam Howell, let's see what he's got. Let's see what he
Yeah.
has. But with the news coming out today with Lamar Jackson, I don't care anymore. At least give a call, see what the tag is. You know that he's going to be negotiating another deal. And I actually, earlier today, before we came on the show, I created a list of every quarterback that is starting on every team. And I checked
Okay.
off if they have a stable starter, and I made sure to add them in the potential mix for teams that Lamar Jackson could end up with.
Okay.
Okay. So the teams that are probably going to be drafting a quarterback are the Texans, the Colts, and the Panthers. With the Falcons saying what they said today, I'll throw the Falcons in there as well.
Okay.
All right. Now, the one team that I think could hinder from drafting a quarterback and signing a quarterback like Lamar is going to be the Las Vegas Raiders. But I think that at pick 7, you're probably looking at drafting a quarterback because if you do go out to get a guy like Lamar, you're going to have to pay him, number one. And number two, you're going to give up 2 first-round picks. Do they
Yeah.
want to give up the 7th-round pick? They want to give up the 7th pick overall this year and then give up another potentially high pick next year given the state of that team? Probably not. So then I whittled it down to some other teams. Okay, obviously Baltimore's in the mix because he's their quarterback.
Mm.
Tennessee Titans,
Yeah.
maybe, but I think they're going to stick with Tannehill because that team's kind of on the come down, and I
Yeah.
don't know if they're going to want to
It's
make a move with the
it's
state of their roster right now.
it sounds like they're selling too, moving up a lot of veteran players. Derrick Henry could be for sale. Now that's not to say if I was Tennessee, I would inquire about thinking of picking a quarterback, but I agree with you. I don't think they're going to.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to. Raiders, I already stated. I'll throw Tampa Bay in there because Lamar is from Florida. Tampa Bay, they don't have Tom Brady anymore. I don't know what they're going to do. It seems like they're going to be going towards a rebuild, but you have receivers like Chris
This, yeah,
Godwin and Mike
mhm,
Evans, and you still have stable offensive
for
pieces.
sure.
So I don't know what Tampa Bay's mindset is right now after losing Tom Brady. So then I get down to 3 teams. And the 3 teams that I think that could heavily make a move for him outside of Baltimore, because Baltimore's clearly the guy that he's playing for. Um, San Francisco 49ers, they need a quarterback. Uh, Trey Lance is a trade asset you could have. How much is it for you to say, hey, how many first round picks do you want, Baltimore? Get Trey Lance, and we'll throw the picks in there. And if you want some mid rounders, sure, why
Okay.
not?
It's
I think
interesting.
I
I
think
didn't think of
San,
that. That's
yeah,
interesting.
I think San Fran should definitely be in the mix. They're in the NFC. They need a
Yeah.
quarterback. They are a quarterback away from winning multiple Super Bowls. They
Yeah.
have literally everything in place, a defense, offensive weapons. They need a quarterback. I think that Trey Lance and a couple first round picks could maybe seal the deal there. Can't throw out the New York Jets. Whether they're going to go after Aaron Rodgers or Lamar, they're going to get one of the two, I feel. I think Aaron Rodgers is good but done in Green Bay. And then finally, I'm going to leave it up to my Washington Commanders. Yeah, they said today that they don't want to go after him, but I don't care. I still think that Ron Rivera and Eric Bieniemy are going to have a talk, and I think Eric Bieniemy is going to be like, "Look at the state of the NFC right now. The NFC East is legit. The Giants already addressed their quarterback need with Daniel Jones today, so you're looking at Jalen Hurts and Dak, who are more than well quarterbacks in the division. Jalen Hurts easily top 5 quarterback after what I saw in the Super Bowl, so you're going to have to compete with them. Look at the NFC South. They have Derek Carr.
It's Derek Carr, and that's it.
Yeah, Derek Carr, that's it. You're probably going to go and draft some players for the other 3 teams. I look at the NFC North. Fields, I'm going to say Jordan Love because I don't think Aaron Rodgers will be there anymore.
Okay.
Jared Goff's going to probably stay there. They liked what he did last year.
Yep.
Kirk Cousins is going to stay there as well in Minnesota. Then I look at the West. Outside of San Fran, Stafford, Geno, and Kyler are all under contract. So what does that mean? In a weak conference with I would say the lesser of the good quarterbacks,
for sure, 100%.
You have to make a move. You have everything in place. You need to at least inquire. And if you even pull the trigger and make a move for Lamar Jackson, I'm going to say it right now. If this team does get Lamar Jackson, I don't see a reason where they can't be a Super Bowl contender.
And I agree, especially in that weaker NFC conference. Austin, I had said for months really on this show, I don't understand how Baltimore did not pay Lamar Jackson. I mean, I don't care about his injury history. You watch them with him, they're legitimately a Super Bowl contender, and you watch them without him, they barely were able to move the football. I think that Baltimore is in a very tough division, obviously, with Joe Burrow in Cincinnati, whatever Deshaun Watson and the Browns decide to do, see if they can improve. Obviously, Pittsburgh almost made the playoffs this year somehow, and they weren't even very good, to be honest. And so that's a very tough division. AFC is obviously a tougher conference, and they don't really have a backup plan, outside of picks, if Lamar Jackson were to go. And so my gut feeling tells me, I actually think, contrary to a lot of people's belief, I think he somehow winds up back in Baltimore. I think they end up mending the fences, and I think he does test the market. I think somebody will end up, whether it's the Jets or Commanders, giving him an offer, and I think Baltimore will ultimately decide to match it because, in my opinion, if they don't, you're completely stuck. The only option I think that would benefit them is maybe your suggestion for Trey Lance, and I like it if you're San Francisco, but cap-wise, I don't know how that would work the way their quarterback situation is structured, and then bringing in Lamar, would San Francisco have to give up some of those big, defensive pieces, possibly even a Deebo Samuel, to fit Lamar Jackson underneath their cap? I don't know the question of that, and so that's why I think Lamar would probably not be in play for San Francisco, but I do like that suggestion.
Yeah, and I talked to a Ravens fan today that I'm good friends with, and he lives down in Columbus. He's been a Ravens fan for 15 years. And I asked him today, I said, hey, how do you feel right now? You got to be going through it with Lamar being under all this news. And he said, I ultimately want this to be final. I think in the end, he will get around $200 million guaranteed. Yep. And like you said, the Ravens are going to match it. I think the Ravens are now at a crossroad because you know that this is your franchise, but they have handled this situation very poorly. And it almost seems like Lamar is the bridge is the bridge is burned. It's burned, man. I don't understand how you've been fumbling this contract talk since the beginning of last offseason.
Yeah, I don't get it.
It's just been so bad, Brandon, to see this front office handle the situation poorly. Lamar deserves to be paid. We all know he deserves to be paid. Enough is enough. He is, when healthy, a top 5 quarterback in this league. And he has, with the Ravens for the longest time after his MVP season, when he's on the field, they're good. Like, he is the reason they ultimately win games.
They're not just good. I mean, the numbers tell you, even though they haven't gotten there, they're legitimate Super Bowl contenders with him.
Yeah, and it's just remarkable how this team thinks that they don't feel like they should pay him. I
It's
know that the Deshaun Watson deal may have had some snag into this because when you pay a guy like Deshaun Watson, if you're the Cleveland Browns, $200 million guaranteed, now a lot of quarterbacks are going to want that
yeah.
because
Well,
the
again,
Browns are willing to go all in for Deshaun Watson, who didn't really play too great this year, but again, he
yeah,
was coming off a huge
yeah.
layoff, so you got to see how he plays next year.
Absolutely, and there are quarterbacks like Daniel Jones. That I know me and you are probably both happy about this. Daniel Jones, they just got over $30 million. And listen, Daniel Jones, me and you have said it for months. He is a below average quarterback. I don't care if the Giants made the playoffs. I don't care if they won a playoff game. I don't care what his numbers say. Daniel Jones is not very good, and so the fact that he gets over 30 million. Derek Carr got an expensive contract from the Saints, and I like Derek Carr, but it's certainly a lot of money. We'll see what Jimmy Garoppolo gets. There's a lot of speculation out there. Jimmy Garoppolo could be going to Vegas. I think if that doesn't happen, I think the Jets, as a backup plan, sort of, if they can't get Rodgers, would look to go after Jimmy Garoppolo. So there's a lot of quarterback movement. I think that's going to happen, Austin, and I I think I have an idea of what these guys are going to do, but I like Derek Carr. I thought NFC South, but I was thinking more Carolina. Offensive head coach, but better weapons. I thought you can go in there and win the division, especially the Saints being in salary cap hell. So there's a lot of moving pieces here that I just think we don't know. And I think Rodgers' decision will not have as much of an impact on Lamar, but I think Rodgers is almost going to be the first domino to fall, wherever that may be, right? It sounds like he's talking to the Jets. I know you said that you think he's out in Green Bay. I still believe he probably is, but I would go back to Green Bay. I've been saying that. I would. I think the NFC, as we've talked about, is a lot weaker of a conference, and I don't know really why he would want to go through Josh Allen, Tua, Joe Burrow, Lamar, whoever in that AFC going, Mahomes, Herbert, Russell Wilson now in Denver, as opposed to in the NFC, you're almost just going through Jalen Hurts, and you can make the argument, from I really maybe Stafford is the second best quarterback in the NFC if Aaron's not there. I mean, I really don't know.
Yeah, and I see what you're saying, but the way I see it with Aaron Rodgers is I just think there's nothing left for him there. And I think that with how the front office feels that he has made this spectacle of making his decision and how basically he took the contract because he wanted the money. Let's just be honest. He wanted the payday and he deserves a payday. But I think there's just nothing left in Green Bay because I look at the state of that division and I see that the Vikings are pretty good. I think the team that's really going to be good next year are the Detroit Lions.
And I agree. And I'll push back a little bit on Minnesota. I think they're good. I don't know how good they are. I think they have a legit ceiling, one, because I think Kirk Cousins is Kirk Cousins, and he will win you regular season games, and he will probably not win you postseason games. And Minnesota, they did win a lot of one possession games. I think they were like 11-0 last year in one possession games. So they almost, to me, feel like a pullback team. Detroit, I agree with you. I think Detroit, if Aaron leaves, Detroit to me is the best team in that division. And Chicago's very interesting depending on what they do with that number one pick. If I was them, I would probably keep Fields and trade the pick and get a bunch of assets because I would rebuild that offensive line, rebuild that receiving core, and actually get some talent around Fields and see what you can do. It sounds like they're going to use the draft to go defense, which again I think is tone deaf and they shouldn't do. I think you need to address the offense side of the ball, but that's for another day. But very interesting again. Like I don't know. I agree. I would go back to Green Bay, but you make a compelling point.
Yeah, with Chicago, it's funny you bring this up. They have $96 million in cap space. That's the most in the NFL. Ryan Poles is going to have a field day
You
getting
go
some of these top.
buy receivers, go buy some linemen. Like
Yeah, they need to address the offensive line, and I think they're going to end up with Orlando Brown Jr. That's
Okay.
just they need to
I would like
they
it. Yeah.
have to address the offense. And if you do not address the offense at all this offseason, then Ryan Poles should be fired before the season starts. You have to go out and help Justin Fields. You saw what he can do this year. He's one of the best rushing quarterbacks in the league, maybe the best rushing quarterback in the league. I know Lamar will have a little bit of pushback with that because he was hurt. But I think that Justin Fields is definitely a top 2 or top 3 rushing quarterback. I'm going to include Jalen Hurts in there as well. So I think you have to address offense. I know that they're going to address a little bit of the defense. I feel like there are some good free agents out there where you could be like, hey, let's go ahead and get some free agent pieces for the defense. I think they should look at a guy like Javon Hargraves. I think
For
they
sure.
need to maybe look at a guy like James Bradbury, funny enough, at cornerback. I think that they need to make a couple free agent moves defensively. But yeah, you need to go out and get offense because that is your biggest that is your biggest need overall. And they have the cap space to do it. They have the quarterback that as long as he can become a better throwing quarterback, Justin Fields will be a problem for years to come. He just has to get the throwing aspect of the game more tuned up a little bit. But for the Chicago Bears, I like what you said. It's going to be interesting because now Ryan Poles is on the clock. He's got to
Yes.
make moves. And if he makes the necessary and correct moves, they could be a problem next year. And I would throw them in there with Detroit. But going back to Aaron Rodgers, Brandon, I honestly just think there's nothing left there. I think Alan Lazard seems like he's out the door already. So that's another wide receiver that you're not going to have. And they've clearly not understood the picture of getting wide receivers higher up in the draft. I get Christian Watson was a second or third round pick this year, but still, you need to go ahead and get a wide receiver in the first round. You can't wait rounds down to figure out what you need to do. So I just think that there's nothing left in Green Bay. If he goes back to Green Bay, great, play out the contract. But I think the front office is getting fed up with some of these antics that he's doing.